There was a surprise this weekend. The president gave an interview to the New York Times, and the topic turned to the XL pipeline. The president said, among other things, that it would not create as many jobs as the Republicans have said. It said it was a job blip, a blip relative to the need. Many other things he talked about. One of the biggest supporters of the XL pipeline is Representative Lee Terry, Republican from Nebraska, who joins us on the line now. Congressman Terry, thanks for joining us. And when you heard what the president said, what was your reaction?
I don't know if I was surprised or not. It seems to be the narrative that the administration is setting up to cause further delays in the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. But the narrative is absolutely false. And when the president said there's no evidence, the reality is there's plenty of evidence, including their own State Department's analysis, that it would create upstream and downstream a total of 41,000 jobs, including the construction jobs.
So, okay, there's that. And then the president also said, look, I'll make this decision. In fact, let's hear the president say it. Here's the president talking about one of the things that he will use to decide the issue.
But I do want to be clear. Allowing the Keystone Pipeline to be built requires a finding that doing so would be in our nation's interest. And our national interest will be served only if this project does not significantly exacerbate the problem of carbon pollution. The net effects of the pipeline's impact on our climate will be absolutely critical to determining whether this project is allowed to go forward.
All right, so he's trashing the Republican talk about all the jobs, and he's saying that, look, it has to be carbon neutral, or I can't be in support of it, and it wouldn't be in the best interest of the American people to be in favor of it. What do you say to that?
Well, he's changing the definition of what's in the nation's interests. But I would refer him to, again, the 15,000-page environmental impact study and the life cycle greenhouse gas section that said there would be no substantial impact on greenhouse gases. So what he's setting up is this narrative to reject the already done independent study, 15,000 pages, to come up with something that meets what he wants to base a rejection of the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah, and also, Congressman, because Canada, this is their pipeline that they're going to send it somewhere, this oil. They're going to send it down to our Gulf, or they're going to send it over to Vancouver to go out to China. Doesn't this suggest that Canada hasn't been responsible in their environmental impact studies, that they haven't dotted enough I's and crossed enough T's to satisfy the President of the United States? Is it kind of an insult?
Well, that's the trap that they're putting Canada in, and the extraction from the oil sands. The reality is they have greatly diminished the amount of energy needed to get the oil sands out, the oil, so they could put it in the pipeline. But I want to circle back to a little bit. You have a good point that this oil is going to be used by somebody. China already owns a significant amount of the leases. They bought the second largest oil extraction company in Canada. They will use this. So to say that if we don't use the Keystone or the oil from the oil sands, will reduce carbon emissions by not using it is absolutely a false premise. Somebody in this world is going to use that oil. It's the third largest pool of oil in the world now, and it's just silly to think that nobody's going to use it.
Representative Lee Terry is our guest, Republican of Nebraska. He's also on the Committee on Energy and Commerce. So this really rings home for you, not just because of Nebraska, but because of your committee seat as well. You're saying that the environmental impact study that the State Department did, Obama's State Department, came out and said 42,000 jobs are going to be created. The president said, it's just a blip, only a couple of thousand jobs. That's a pretty wide gulf.
Yeah.
Is there? Where's the ambiguity here? I mean, there's got to be a disconnect. How are we going from 42,000 just down to 2,000? Do you have any explanation?
Well, yeah, the cynical part of me says this is just another misinformation campaign from the administration. But I think what he's trying to do to give him some relevance there is just he excludes any of the upstream or downstream and the construction jobs, and just saying that there'll be a small amount of permanent jobs. He didn't say that, but that's the only analysis I could come up with that would give it some semblance of accuracy.
Oh, I see. Permanent job. Well,
So he calls it a job blip. Do you? I mean,
how do the people of Nebraska feel about that?
I mean,
It's
would
just a
they
blip.
like a little blip right now?
No, all of our union houses, from the laborers to the pipe fitters to the electric workers, they're all sitting here waiting to be blipped.
I bet they are. Congressman Terry, let me ask you this, because, a lot of this, the conversation seems to be about the environment and it seems to be about jobs. So let's talk about energy security for a minute. I mean, for the first time, we finally see an idea here where the United States and North America can move closer to energy independence so that we're less dependent on countries like Venezuela and Saudi Arabia and Yemen. What does that mean to us geopolitically?
Geopolitically, it's a game changer for the United States. We don't have to rely on OPEC countries. We don't have to rely on Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, and that's the key here. This is about energy security. Yeah, the impact at the pumps is probably going to be fairly minimal. You're going to save a lot of pennies in transportation costs, but we get to be in charge of one of the most important economic drivers, and that's our own energy. And that's so key to our economic future.
If you had to make a guess right now, are you pretty certain that the president is leaning toward voting against this pipeline?
This weekend, with the interview with the New York Times and then Jack Lew coming on the morning shows and talking about how the Republicans have screwed up Keystone, that sets up a narrative to me. When you see that there's these multiple fronts, that tells me that they've got a plan where they're going to kill it. They're going to come out and ask for a new study, and that's just another term for killing the Keystone Pipeline. So they're setting up the narrative now to kill it.
And what will be the response from Republicans?
Well, we've already passed a bill in the House of Representatives following what was done with two pipelines coming out of Canada through Alaska, Canada, and into the United States, where Congress in the past has just deemed it approved. So now we're waiting on the Senate, but I think that'll put a lot more pressure on the Senate to pass the bills after we have.
Well, and based on your answers, Congressman, it sounds like if the President and Secretary Kerry do say no to Keystone Pipeline, they're basically saying no to cheaper gas, more jobs, a better economy, and energy independence and geopolitical strength against our foreign enemies. That's quite a decision, and they're holding environmentalism above.
That's exactly right, and I think the people in this country are going to realize that, and there's going to be a heck of a discussion on whether or not we want to injure our own security.
Thank you, Congressman.
We're
We've got to roll.
right there. Thank you, Congressman Terry Lee. Lee Terry, we appreciate it very much.